Today, we become legends.
So the 10.6 Season of Souls patch changes a lot about the game, with sweeping rebalances, huge Conquest updates, new game mechanics, and more. Now that I've had a chance to play a fair few games on PTS and digest the changes for a bit, I just wanted to make a quick video giving my thoughts on the state of the game in this patch. What's good, what's bad, all that kind of stuff. Keep in mind this is still very early and the meta definitely has not settled yet, plus there might be some changes and fixes out of PTS or in a bonus update, but these are just my thoughts as of the initial patch and how it plays. So first up, the elephant in the room. Is it a tank meta? Personally, I think that depends on your definition of a tank meta. Yes, tanks are much stronger than the previous patch, so if you're someone who thought tanks were already good, then yeah, by your view, it probably is a tank meta. However, my view, and I think the view of the majority, was that tanks were weaker than DPS before this patch, and therefore needed some changes. I think overall, discounting some outliers that we'll talk about in a second, it's a very balanced meta. It feels like every role has a shot at doing work on the team. Tanks are tanky, but not unkillable, as many people who probably not even played on this patch will scream on Twitter and in my comment section, but make no mistake, tanks are definitely stronger than before, but in my opinion, if they weren't stronger than 10.5, it's a failed patch, because something needed to be done about that. However, I mentioned some outliers, so let's talk about those. I think overall, mid is the only role right now that feels like it's way below the rest. It's not unplayable by any means, but several changes in this patch brought mid down a lot. The item nerfs for starters. Mages are the class that relies the absolute most on power for damage. Hunters rely more on attack speed and penetration. Junglers, who were probably hit the second hardest by the item changes, have way more potential to switch up builds, like auto-attack junglers, some junglers that can slot in a bruiser item or two, or even the ones that go full power can still get stuff done with AA cancels and CC. Mages though, they're extremely reliant on heavy power, and so nerfing almost every item they use by 30% has hit them hard. Not to mention the nerfs to Soul Reaver and Pendulum as well. Pretty much every item in the meta mid-mage build of last patch was hit insanely hard. Not just that, mid also gets less farm than before. In 10.5, mid was getting the most farm on the map by a decent margin, but now with the addition of more objectives around mid, especially the Stygian Beacon, there's more splitting going on in mid, meaning the actual mid laner gets less farm than before. So not only are their items nerfed, they also get those items slower. Mid is, in my opinion, the only role that needs some kind of sweeping change after this patch, or we're just gonna see a double hunter meta, I think, especially because tanks are strong and hunters are still shredding as they always have. So having two of them to kill the strong tanks makes sense. Their item pool was also hit the least hard of all three of the DPS classes, since they rely way more on attack speed and on-hit effects rather than just raw power, which was the only thing actually nerfed in the update. Attack speed was basically untouched, and the only on-hit effect that was touched was kin size, but specifically only against squishies. It's the same 6% against tanks, so the shred build will still do work. Sure, tanks have a bit less HP than before, so kin size isn't quite as effective, but it's more important to shred those tanks now because they're a bigger threat rather than a wet noodle. So I think it balances out overall, and hunters are still very strong and needed. The best of the DPS roles in this patch, in my opinion. Talking about tanks being a threat though, I think in general this is absolutely great. They feel good to play, mages and assassins struggle a bit more to take them down, but hunters still delete them. It's gotten a bit closer to the rock paper scissors system Smite has always been built around. That system of tanks beat burst because they can't be one-shot, burst beats ADC because they kill them before they can put out their sustained DPS, and ADC beats tank because the tank can't last under all that DPS. This system has been eroded over time, mostly by burst still being able to kill tanks, and that kind of breaks the whole chain. This patch brings us closer to that triangle, and I like it. However, there are a few outliers with tanks. Pridwin is the most obviously broken one. Both new glyphs for this item are insane, and an auto build on both tank rolls in my opinion. The damage of red Pridwin and the survivability of blue Pridwin are just too much, and both need nerfs in my opinion. This item alone is pretty much warping the meta in favour of tanks, and I think if this and maybe a couple of other things were tweaked slightly downwards, along with some buffs for mage itemization, we'd have a perfectly balanced meta, more than we can say for the last few patches. The nerfing of aura items also had a big impact on tanks being able to threaten backliners, as tanks don't build penetration, and so backliners losing 20 procs or so means they do a good chunk more base damage with each ability or basic from a tank. This is good in my opinion and should stay this way. Nerf the outlier broken items like Pridwin, and I think tanks will feel very playable, but not too oppressive. Moving on from the meta though, let's talk a bit about how Conquest feels in general, because there's been a lot of changes made to the mode this patch. The Stygian Beacon I think is a great addition, as it not only encourages fights around it, preventing teams from just AFK farming and playing too much for the late game, but also its reward grants structure damage, and of course the Unleashed Titan, reasons, both of which help with winning the game. After several patches with the anti-snowball changes from 10.3, this is a breath of fresh air and it feels a lot more punishing to just give up every objective and play for the late game. You have to contest these things now or the enemy team will just get too far ahead and be able to end off of it. Be that with the Unleashed Titan push or just 3 stacks of Beacon plus EFG. The Soul Surges are something I'm not really a fan of. I don't hate them, but I also think nothing would change if they remove them and they're a bit pointless. That's not to say they don't impact the game, they give some useful stuff, but the fact that the effect applies for both teams makes them feel a little bit redundant. Again, I don't hate them, but they're just a bit of a nothing burger. But yeah, TLDR, meta feels very balanced, mage itemization needs buffs, and a few tank items need nerfs. The game is less turtle oriented and there's more to do on the map. Very excited to get into some proper games on this patch when it drops to the live client soon. Let me know your own thoughts down below. I know this is a very controversial patch and a lot of you watching probably don't agree with everything I've said here. Looking forward to seeing your opinions in the comments. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.